All of the views and opinions expressed here are those of the individual speaking and may not be representative of Konig American. At times, language may be considered vulgar. Listener discretion is suggested.
You are now listening to the Konig Behind the Wheel podcast.
All right, welcome to a special episode of the Behind the Wheel podcast. I'm Scott, I'm the marketing director for Konig Wheels. With me is Joey Redman. Joey's the founder of Wrecked Magazine and has been published in over 20 automotive magazines. Additionally, he has built SEMA vehicles for OEs like Hyundai and Ford. Finally, you can find his 10 Things Learned article available on formuladrift.com after each FD event. In case you're new to the podcast, Joey and I get together after each FD round. We briefly run through some thoughts and highlights from the event. This is in addition to our regular podcast format, so make sure to look for the next one, which will be after round 7 in Texas. So for St. Louis, this was the first time we were at Gateway. There was a lot of learning that happened here for drivers and teams. This is the longest and fastest track that I think FD has in their schedule, right?
I don't know if it's the longest.
I think it is. I think I went and actually did a little research because I heard somebody say that. I think Chris Forsberg actually said that in an interview. He said this is the longest track that we have, and I went and looked, and I was like, oh, you know what? It may be.
Really? I feel like Irwindale's bound to be longer, but maybe that's just my own.
Yeah, maybe he's just saying
bias.
Well, like maybe it's the longest of the faster tracks. I'm not really sure. But
I mean, he probably knows more than I do. I mean, it's definitely the longest. It's like the longest turn, I guess you could say. That last decreasing radius turn. Yeah, it's basically just like a larger version of Texas Motor Speedway, right? At that part,
right.
To me, the length isn't necessarily what's so crazy about Gateway. I think it's the speed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really translate on the live stream because they use those really high camera angles.
Yeah, it's hard to tell from the camera.
But I mean, you're talking they're going 3 times the speed of Long Beach, basically.
Right.
I mean, when you think about that in perspective, like imagine any speed in a vehicle times 3, right? Like even the different, imagine the difference in your reactions if you're going 35 on everyday, imagine like you going 35 on the interstate.
Right.
And then imagine you going, 100 on like a side street.
Right.
It's like that's like the gap of 3 times. And so, I mean, I think there were a lot of drivers that probably aren't used to drifting that fast. I mean, obviously you're a professional and you get in where you fit in, but there's not a lot of triple digit drifting going on, I think, anywhere in the world.
Right. Yeah. I think this track had a lot of technical pieces to it. It really seemed, if you would watch a lot of the drivers, if you stumbled off your line early on in the course, it made it kind of tough to recover your line and get back on and be able to finish off with any given success. We saw that with a number of drivers. So I don't know. I mean, I think Gateway brought with it a lot of excitement. And if you watch this event, this was definitely kind of a mix-up of what you may have seen over the past half-plus season. So, listen, I thought it was a really good event. I thought that this was probably the most exciting event that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I think me too. I mean, I'm maybe a little more familiar than Gateway with most, like the old event series.
Right.
I helped run Street Driven. We did Gateway every single year.
Right.
My first experience with Gateway, I think, was even like Nopi Drift back in like 2006.
Was the same? Did you guys use in Street Driven event? Did you use the same course configuration, or was it slightly different?
Street Driven is an identical course layout to the Formula D course.
Okay.
So, I mean, honestly, there's not really – I can't even really take credit for it. I think Midwest Drift Union, which they're not around anymore either, but
right.
the Midwest Pro-Am series also ran that configuration, and I think Drift STL, the few times they do the road course, they run that configuration. It's not that it's like everyone's playing off everyone. There's not really another way to run the course.
Okay.
The way the road course is configured, it's kind of complicated. It uses part of the NASCAR track, which they won't allow you to drift on the NASCAR track, so that kind of eliminates like a large part of the road course. And I think some guys have explored running it in reverse, and from what I understand, I kind of lack some of that super technical knowledge, but like it just doesn't really work with like that kink where you kind of start out. Like it's really funky to go across because you have to go across the berms, right? So when you're going across the berms in reverse, it doesn't work as well.
Right. So what I thought was interesting about St. Louis was it seemed like that last outer clipping zone, with the one with the the big sweep. It seemed like so many drivers, whether you're watching Pro 2 or you're watching qualifying, or maybe this was just haven't been there before, kind of getting used to the line, maybe not having enough speed generated, but by the time you got to the outer part of that, that clipping. But the issue to me was that and it didn't seem about horsepower or not, but if you didn't have enough speed, you just couldn't get the car to to obviously stay in drift to that well outer zone. And I know that Ryan, the one of the FD judges, was basically kind of making a point to the drivers in their drivers meeting that is part of the course that they're really going to be looking at. They're making sure that you get all the way to that outer zone. Like they don't want to see you, shorting up or shallowing up that line and then coming into that last clip. So, but it seemed like that was a big issue. And then there was that risk reward where some of the guys got really overzealous, came in with a little bit too much speed, and once you touched that grass, which was basically like hitting glass, once you went off the course, especially in qualifying, because they had like pretty epic rainstorms. So I don't know how wet the grass really was, but it seemed like especially in qualifying, especially in Pro 2 qualifying, when you touched off course, especially in that outer zone there, you really went for a ride, and it was lights out.
It did seem that way. I miss Pro 2 qualifying specifically. I did hear that from a couple guys, but it definitely did not seem like, I think really it was a mixture of two things. I think when the Pro 2 guys did qualifying, it was still really, really wet.
Right.
And so I think then what happened is when the Pro 2 guys went off course, they really rutted the track up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I think by the time the pro guys and Pro 2 competition got there, there was basically no margin. Like you were basically just, like going from like track to ground. Like there wasn't like a smooth, like, oh, I'm just going to pop into the grass here real quick. Is really like upsetting the car and throwing the car off. But, that's just one of the things that comes with being on a real racetrack, right? Like, if you look at Road Atlanta, there's not much forgiveness there with like the pea gravel, right, on the one side.
Sure.
You got to take the good with the bad. I will say when two drivers were drifting that course correctly, it was some of the best drifting ever. Like,
right.
I think I mentioned in the top 10, like Dean Kearney's chase run and like top 32 with Pitior, like they both hit that clip. They both ran that outside line like really close together and really well. It was just really entertaining. Like Vaughn versus James Dean, I think in top 16 was another one that was like when two guys could put it together, it was like, wow, this is really close door-to-door drifting, but also really high speed, which I think is something, it's nice to see like different variables being brought into Formula Drift.
Right. So I think that kind of covers your point 10, which you kind of summed up as Gateway is great. I mean, you I think in kind of summary of what we just kind of said, Gateway was a really good event. It was nice to see. It was a change of pace, maybe coming off the last 6 rounds. So I think you would agree that this was an event that we hope stays in their schedule for years to come.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I haven't really talked to anyone from Formula D since that event, whether they consider it a success or a failure.
Right. I'm sure the gate has a lot to do with that. So
yeah, exactly. Honestly, when we were doing our events there, it was one of our lower gate attendances, but we kind of wanted to stay in the Midwest. That might be a motivation for Formula D as well, just to kind of check that box. They've been very coast focused, and it seems like they've been trying to fix that. I mean, they added Texas, which I do know from talking to the guys at Formula D, like Texas has grown year over year.
Right.
So I imagine they'll probably put like a 3-year investment into Gateway and see what they can turn it into.
Right.
St. Louis isn't the greatest metropolitan city nationwide, but if you can do well, you can pull down from Chicago, which I think is 4 or 5 hours. Kansas City's 4 or 5 hours. So
right.
There's some potential there. There's probably some better tracks geographically in the Midwest, but I think from like quality of the venue, I think that's probably the best the Midwest can offer, like in like a city environment.
Yeah, and then that track is a real, I don't want to say racetrack. It sounds ridiculous, but they hold really big events. I mean, they're, like you said, they're a NASCAR track. This isn't a mom and pop type track. So,
and honestly, I don't have a problem with mom and pop tracks.
No, of course not.
I think the issue that I see with Formula D is I don't want to see any more ovals.
Right. Yeah, we've done it.
I don't mind the ones that are on the cards, really. I could live without wall. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't want more than half the series being ovals. Like it's, at the end of the day, there's plenty of ovals I think they could go to all around the Midwest. But at the end of the day, I think it's nice to see
some of the road courses mixed in.
Yeah, I just more than anything, I like variety. I don't want to get rid of the ovals, but it's like I don't want to only be ovals. I like that Long Beach is kind of like, a road course. It's really like a kind
street,
of a parking lot setup. Yeah,
right.
Street course.
Yeah.
It does use a little part of a real street, but I think the variety keeps the competition level high. Like there are guys that have clear skill sets. There's guys that do really well at these road courses, like a Ken Gushi. Ken Gushi can dominate these road courses, and then he can't figure out how to drift on a oval to save his life.
That's tough.
But that's what separates the men from the boys. I mean, if you look at NASCAR, I think it's the same way. There's guys that are really good at the half-mile tracks. There's guys that are really good at the 2.5, the super speedways.
Right.
There's guys that are good at the mile ovals in between. There's a few guys that are really good at the road courses. So I just think for you to be considered like a world championship or like
you should see a mix of courses and different terrain and stuff like that.
Exactly. I want to see your skill set across a multitude of different, environments.
And I think FD has done a good job about trying to. I think they're extremely conscious and aware of that. I believe that they're trying to do as much diversification as they can within their schedule. I mean, obviously, there's a great logistical part that goes into trying to find these venues and plan these venues and bring the amount of resources and staff and amenities to each venue that they go to. So there's a lot of behind the scenes there, but I believe that they've done a very good job about trying to balance out the amount of looks and track styles that they get.
Totally.
So your point number 9, which is one of my favorites because it's talking about Travis Reeder. Travis Reeder is better than some of the pro circuit drivers is your point number 9. Look, Travis is incredibly talented. I think I've been saying it since we started doing these, and I've had a good behind the scenes working experience with Travis. He's a good all around dude and an extremely talented driver. And I even said, after last year when he made a really, he was second place in Pro 2 last year, that this was a guy that had the skill set to make the move. And really what Travis's, inability to make the move had to do everything with budgeting. There's just not enough money that he could pull in to be able to make the jump up to pro. So you kind of are pointing out that he's definitely better than a good handful of drivers that are in pro right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to name any names.
Of course.
But I mean, if you take maybe the bottom ranked 5 or 6 guys in pro,
right?
I think Reeder could probably beat them 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10. I don't know. I think I'm always just in general really tough on the Pro 2 kids because I think so many times you just see that, you see that like you got a guy in Pro 2 who's maybe got a little bit more budget or a little bit better of a car or a little bit better of a mechanic. He shows up, he beats up on everybody, and then he goes into pro and kind of disappears into the ether. I think Reeder grabbed my attention originally by not going into pro. I liked the fact that he stayed in Pro 2. He was like this close to being champion, right?
Really
like,
was.
This close. And, I don't know. I like the fact that he stuck around. I think I pointed out in my article, if he can win one more event, either Texas or Owendale, he's already poised to be tied as the most winning Pro 2 driver in history. So,
right.
Obviously there's not a ton of history in Pro 2, but to me, I think it would be, if he doesn't have the budget, I just stay in Pro 2. And honestly, there's a larger conversation I've been involved in. I don't want to get too off the rails here, but I think they should work on rebranding Pro 2. They're kind of getting there already, but rebranding Pro 2 a little bit to encourage other drivers to drive in it. I don't think it should be implied that it's such a feeder series. I think there should be some encouragement to get some of these lower tier pro guys to drive in it. Once again, using the example, I know it's sounding like a NASCAR heavy podcast here, but look at the Nationwide series, right? You have, the Busch brothers driving in there. You have a lot of different guys who are doing both. And it's I think it would only help Pro 2 if you could get some of these guys who, I don't think we expect to see Von Gittin Jr. show up in Pro 2, but I think it would be great if a guy like Jeff Jones and Kyle Mohan, they're really poised veterans, but they're not, through budget or whatever means, they don't quite have that top tier program where they can kind of compete. So then I think it's also it's helping a guy like Travis Reeder know where he needs to be in pro.
Right.
But I think a guy I think is a perfect example is Pat Gooden. For whatever reason, he didn't have his funding or anymore. He kind of disappeared from the sport. But I think it's too much of I don't want to speak for Pat specifically, but I think for a lot of these guys, it's kind of an ego blow to be oh, I'm going to go run Pro 2, and be a newbie.
Well, and listen, the Pro 2 class, even though it's probably one of the better ones that we've seen in maybe ever, but even though the skill level is higher there, there's certainly a mix of people that I don't want to say don't belong there. That's not the right terminology, but maybe, when you watch an event like this where there was well more than 16 drivers that competed in Pro 2, you have to look at some of these guys and say, man, the ones that didn't qualify, there's something wrong there. And here's what I mean by this, just to, not to diminish anybody's talent or skill level, but but here's the thing. You look at a guy like Travis Reeder. Travis Reeder finished, he competed in Pro 2 last year, first year ever. He was second, and arguably, potentially, you could make the case that he should have been a Pro 2 champion. Now,
okay.
He returns back to Pro 2 this year, and again, top of the field. This is not somebody that's questionable. He didn't pop in for, he's constantly going to be dominating that series because he has the skill level. So when you see drivers come in and they struggle to qualify in Pro 2, time and time again, it's not an accident. It just means that their skill level is not there to be able to kind of continue to compete there. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't change. I'm not saying that, there's car issues or this issues or things that impact how that works, but you get to a point where if every week you're looking at some of these drivers come in and they struggle to qualify, then they do qualify. One of the things I thought was always interesting, and we've talked about this a lot with some of the drivers in our other Formula Drift podcasts, right? not the Former Drift podcast, but like, some FD drivers that have done some of our podcasts, they talk about how, especially the ones that have made the jump from Pro 2 to Pro, Kevin Lawrence hasn't done one with it yet, but we talked to Matt Van Kirk. And one of the things, and we've even talked to Ryan Litterall a few times, and one of the things that they are very, very clear about is that the jump between Pro 2 to Pro 1 sometimes is almost easier, in the sense if you have the skill level to be able to compete with those other drivers, there's a consistency that comes with being in a better field. When you're with the pro drivers, they're much more consistent to follow. You're not guessing what's going to happen in front of you. And if you looked at the Pro 2 field, especially during qualifying and some of those, early on top 16 battles, you watch some of those lead and chase runs. It's extremely unpredictable. If you're a really solid chase driver and you get up there and you're trying to chase a car that's all over the place, they can't hold a line, that's a tough thing to... How do you trust that?
I mean, sure, but I'll make a counter argument that's really simple.
Sure.
If it's so easy to transition from Pro 2 to Pro...
Well, I understand what you mean. That's not exactly what I was... I wasn't exactly making that point, but what I'm saying is there is something to be said about having consistent drivers ahead of you that you can count on when you transition out of a smoke line and all of a sudden they're sideways in front of you versus, kind of being where you think they're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's not talk on this topic all night, but I think part of that just comes down to I think all the pro-ams aren't created equal, right? Like
yes.
You earning your license in one place is very different than earning your license in another place.
Right.
But I mean, what can really be done at that level to a point? Should Ryan Sage be at all 72 pro-ams around the nation, making sure they're held up to a standard? Like, I don't know. I feel like these problems probably exist in most motorsports where you're coming up. Like, I'm sure every ARCA series is not the same. I'm sure all the Formula One, Formula One generally feeds from karting. I'm sure all the karting series aren't the same.
Right.
But, if you're truly dedicated to becoming a pro driver, I think that you can look at the origins of where these successful drivers have come from and probably draw some assumptions of like where you should be going to try and, earn your license, so to speak.
Right. Well, especially if you're really looking at it for the longevity and the long-term, competitiveness of your own program.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I just think that if you're going to go back to the argument of trying to make Pro 2 kind of not necessarily so much of a feeder series and draw some of the bigger names or draw some of the pro level guys back into Pro 2, having a short schedule, having a four event schedule, and maybe kind of the inconsistency of having a solid field all the way through there, it doesn't help to make the case that would be its own series and still kind of looked at on a similar level as pro.
Perhaps.
Maybe. All right. That was an extremely tangent we just jumped off there. Point number 8, Matt Field will be a championship contender in 2019. Matt Field really seems to have ironed out his car and really has ironed out his season this year so far.
Yeah, I did a little more digging after I sent out the article. Matt Field is like him being based up in NorCal. It's like he's like the Golden State Warriors, I guess, of drifting or whatever, where it's like,
okay.
I don't know. I don't watch the NBA, so I might not be using the best analogy, but at least let me just stick with an analogy I know. In American soccer, the Seattle Sounders are a team who sucks like the first 50% of the season, and then magically right around this time of the year, they like win every game and then go on like this magnificent run. And like, that's kind of Matt Field. Like, I thought it was the Corvette, but like when you look at his history as a driver, like, he's really strong at like Texas. He's really strong at Irwindale. He's always been strong at Irwindale. And it's like, when you get to those events like Long Beach and Road Atlanta, he's nowhere to be found. So, I mean, he's lost to some horrific drivers at Road Atlanta. And so I don't, obviously this year you can credit some of that to the Corvette, but it would be curious to see, if he can overcome that like early season slump, he can be a champion. The problem is in Formula D, there's only 8 rounds. And so the average champion is like near or like breaking 500 points. So it's like you start doing that math. I can do that math right here on this lovely device called telephone. But you need 500 points from 8 events. That's 62 points an event, which is basically like you need almost a top 4 per round. Right. So if you win an event, you can afford a top 8. Basically, is kind of how that would counterbalance. Like you can take the 100, get the lower score there, but you're basically looking at you need to be a champion. You basically have to average a Final 4.
Right.
So, and if you want to not average the Final 4, you've got to win. I mean, look at James Dean went out in the top 16 this weekend. Aasbo won, and it went from a 89-point gap to a 30-point gap. So he's just got to figure out what to do at the beginning of the season and like drive like he drives at Irwindale in Long Beach, and he could realistically, be in the contention for that championship next year.
I always think it'd be so interesting to be able to, when we have a conversation like this, to really hear Matt Field's his personal take on that first part of the season for himself, because we don't have that inner part knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes. Sometimes you'll find out it has a lot to do with a car that we don't know, or maybe it's just seat time or skill, or let's get
he probably just called me an a-hole and say, I don't know what I'm talking about, but
pretty accurate, right?
I mean, maybe I feel like I know what I'm talking about,
right? Right, because we're avid drifters. So all right, so your point number 7. And I love this point. Dean Kearney rocked his top 32 battle. Dean Kearney, he certainly has a skill to be a top driver. When he's on, man, he's incredible. And he's probably one of the most exciting drivers to watch. I mean, that Viper, I know, and you even touched on it in your point, there was rumors that it was going away this season.
Yeah.
But it's a cool car to watch. And I really like that it's the only one, right? Only one. Yeah, it's the only Viper that they have out there.
It's cool. I like it, but man, he's had a really embarrassing season. I mean,
I understand.
I don't know what it is, but it's like, I don't even think his car started at Long Beach. I'm trying to remember. His car didn't even start at Long Beach. In Road Atlanta, I think he did a top 16. And that's his only top 16 of the season.
I know.
Every other event he's losing in the top 32, and I don't know what it is, but it's like I agree, when that car's on I really like it, but like it hasn't been on. Like I think this event was the first time I saw him like be the Dean Kearney we all know.
Right.
The issue is he was up against a really good driver and lost.
Well, I mean, that did go to right. I understand he lost. I mean, it went to a one more time battle. And that first match was a good battle. It was him and Forrest. That was a good battle.
Pitchor.
Sorry, correct.
Same car.
Same car. Yeah. Oh, let's see here. But anyhow, either way, I think he has throughout the season. He's had matches, especially whether it be a chase run or he has moments of absolute. I don't want to say brilliance. It's not maybe overplaying it a little bit, but he has moments where he clearly brings an A game, and he's an extremely exciting and talented driver, and you can see it right there. So if you just put it all together.
Yeah, I don't know. He's missing something this year. I don't know if there was like a mental switch off, thinking he wasn't going to have to drive the Viper, and he was going to be in like a 240 SX like everybody else. I don't know what
at
his
one time.
I don't know what his car plans are, but I don't know. I feel like they got to figure something out quick for him, or he's going to just kind of fall into that like irrelevant drifter ether a little bit.
Right. Your point number 6, Chelsea DeNofa is the future of drifting. DeNofa definitely brought his A game for St. Louis, and it was really nice to see him on the podium.
Yeah, I think part of that statement, I think, even has to do with things outside of like Formula D.
Right.
I think as long as he continues to compete in Formula D and does well, I think that will be like a complementary part
piece of the package.
Yeah, but it's like, he's really becoming a drifting ambassador, and it's what I find the most interesting. Just, I wouldn't write about this, but talking about it with you in like this analytical way, it's really interesting to me how he's really like one of the big drivers nowadays. He shows up on he's got, I think, probably one of the most expensive cars in the grid. He's got one of the biggest pit areas on the grid, but somehow he still has this very like grassroots,
approachable feel.
Yeah. And like somebody else said this to me. I won't say who it was. I don't know if I can repeat their words, but they pointed something out to me that I found really interesting. They were like, Chelsea DeNofa is probably one of the only guys who could get busted doing something illegal. And for those listeners that don't know what happened, he was basically like gluing his tires onto the rim back when, people were having a lot of debeating issues. And he got fined. I think it was Orlando. He basically was just disqualified for that event. And he was like, DeNofa is one of the only guys that could like get caught.
That was this year?
No. This was he was in the BMW still, so 2 years ago. But he was using the anecdote of like, Chelsea DeNofa is like the everyday drifter hero. And he was like, could you imagine like if Frederick Aasbo or like one of these other drivers got caught doing that, like you wouldn't hear the end of it. People would still be like complaining and, moaning online and being like, oh, well, Aasbo probably won because he glued his tires together. But like, it's interesting that like DeNofa had that happen, and like it didn't really skip a beat with him. Like people are just, I don't know. He has that like charisma. He has that personality where like I could see as like if you look in the crystal ball of drifting, I feel like he's going to become one of these like Jeremy McGrath or Valentino Rossi or like Lewis Hamilton of the sport, or like just iconic in a certain way. Like he represents the everyday drifter to a lot of guys, and he's very involved in the grassroots, and he does these really cool like breakdown videos on YouTube. I think his package is just, he's positioning himself to be this, amazing drifter. And I think adding to that, he actually had success in St. Louis, and he did these really cool like reverse wild entries in qualifying. Cool. He's just building that kind of hype machine, I think, slowly but surely.
Well, and like you mentioned, his How to Drift series on YouTube is probably one of the best and easy to, like, you literally watch it and you're like, I can do this.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And so that there's that. He goes to a ton of grassroots events, especially specifically up in the Pacific Northwest. He goes to a ton of that stuff, and I think that keeps him very relevant on the scene, and it allows people to feel that he's very approachable. And the truth is, like, when he's not on, in an FD program, he's out there drifting in, E36s and E46s and, stuff that's not these big dollar cars. So I think that there is something there. I think that the social presence is different. And I'm not talking about the amount of social following, because it's not like there's plenty of drivers that have 100, 200, 300,000 followers. But what I'm talking about is the people that I think are following him, I think are really embedded into the drift community. So I think his touch and his correlation kind of extend further than some of the other drivers.
Yeah, for sure.
Your point number 5, St. Louis certainly, I'm going to synopsis this, but basically St. Louis really brought a struggle to some of these teams trying to keep their engines together. That seemed to be apparent. They had a lot of heat. It was a 90-degree average, during the day event. So there, between the heat and I think the high speed and that they needed to maintain to be able to run this course, I think that was probably part of why there were so many issues. But there was a number of teams that were kind of faced with engine problems.
Yeah. I mean, how hot does it get in New York? Like 65 degrees? Is that like your summer?
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just sums it up. I think there was a lot of full throttle. There was a lot of heat. As someone who's just moved to a much hotter place than he lived, it's not fun. It's not very desirable to a point. But I mean, I don't think there's too much to analyze or talk about there. It's just, a combination of factors really put some teams on their behind. And, some teams can keep up, some can't. There was a lot of engine swaps on Thursday. I think there was some other engine issues. I mean, James Dean had an engine issue in top 16 that basically could hinder his whole back-to-back championship.
Right. Yeah, it was messy. So, point number 4, fans were robbed of another Worthouse battle. It just seems like it's never going to happen.
Kinda. Like, I'm almost over it at this point. It's like that overhyped movie that like probably would have been good if no one told you it was going to be good. But since everyone's told you it's good, you're like, really? This is what everyone was excited about?
You wrote about it perfectly. You said you wrote, and I wrote this down because I wanted to make sure. You quote, and I quote, these S15s are indestructible until they battle each other. It's like that's like 100% accurate. These cars are the cars that they're like the ironclad. You know what I mean? They're the Russian in in Rocky, and all of a sudden they go against each other, and it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I forgot that I wrote that, but it was it's just very accurate. I don't know. We got 2 more rounds to see it happen, but I think that's one of the things that everybody's waiting for. Like, we all want to see it, and it will be really interesting based on how Texas shakes out. If Aasbo can maybe say take the lead in Texas, it would be really great at Irwindale to see them battle. But then you also got to kind of wonder, like, would a certain one of them maybe let the other one win because there was like a championship on the line? I mean, it's happened before with some other people. We won't say any names, but I don't know. It's just I think that dynamic and that like the building of that hype, if it were to explode at like an Irwindale and like maybe Petior like steals the championship away from Dean or something, it's something to watch. I don't think we've finished that chapter of that story yet.
Right. Your point number 3, Ken Gushi loves these track styles. It seems like if he can really push past the issues with the car and kind of get things together, he really is a star. I mean, he's an FDOG, right? He's been there for he's been there since day one.
Yeah, and I don't think he's won since Houston 2005. I mean, that's off the top of my head. If I'm wrong, Ken, I apologize. But yeah, maybe it's the car, but it's like, how long can you blame the car? Not saying that like Ken has something to do with it, but like the program, I don't know. Like, there was a time period when all the 86 guys were having problems, right? And it seems like Dye has kind of like overcome these issues. Turk's overcome a lot of these issues. Yeah. And so why does Ken still have these issues? I don't think anybody questions that Ken's a driver that's good, but like, do they need new mechanics? Do they need something? Ken, I feel like, is probably one of the drivers who maybe gets some of the least amount of seat time outside of Formula D. Like, you don't see him at, Just Drift or Irwindale. I don't know. There's something missing there. I definitely think I think I mentioned it earlier in the podcast too. He really struggles at these like ovals, like these non-road course tracks. He struggles in Long Beach. And so Texas has usually been his time to shine. And now he's got Gateway, but you can't just be good at one thing and be successful in Formula D. And I would hate to see one of these OGs leave the sport, but like, I don't know, him or his team really needs to figure out something to unlock the success that some of these other teams are having.
And it's a shame too, because he really is a very, very talented driver.
Agreed.
Yeah. Your point number 2, Pro 2 Championship is in a 1-point race. I mean, look, this is between Travis Reeder and Dylan Hughes. They're separated by only 1 point now. Their match in the finals was it was a hell of a match. I mean, it was incredible. They're both drivers that are skilled. They're both running very similar platforms, so that kind of put it at, neck and neck. They're both good friends, and they're both from the Pacific Northwest. So these are homies that have been driving together since they were, kind of first got into Pro-Am, maybe even before. We had Travis Reeder on, I think it's episode 3 of our podcast, and he basically said one of the questions we had asked him was, pick one of your favorite people to battle in Formula Drift, and his answer was he would always choose Dylan Hughes. And he kind of gave the same reasons: similar cars, similar platforms, driving forever, friends, yada yada yada. But it was interesting. It was almost kind of fun for me to watch, to have that conversation with him, a few months ago, and then to watch them in the finals together. And now they're kind of 1 and 2, neck and neck for the championship.
Yeah, let's see how much Reeder likes Dylan Hughes if he beats him for the championship.
Well, I mean, he liked it now because he won against him.
Well, yeah, but, let's give it 2 more rounds and see how he feels.
Then we can have him back on and we can curse Dylan Hughes out. I'm just kidding.
That'd be
don't.
good.
No.
I agree. I mean, if only Dylan Hughes had Konig wheels, he could have done better.
I know.
Probably.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I really like Dylan, and anybody who I've spoke to has had nothing but good things to say about him. So, if you're listening, shout out. Give me a ring. We'll see what's going on. Is
your phone number going to flash across the bottom of the screen?
Oh, that'd be so good.
212. No, I don't actually
Could you imagine?
It's like a Manhattan area code, I think. That's all I know.
Right. Well, that's what we'll start doing. Start flashing the digits. Your point number 1, Aasbo drove his way to the championship Royal Rumble. So I think really, I mean, look, he really seems to be super focused now. Nothing phases him, and you pointed that out well in your point number 1. He'll people beat in his door and smack him in the quarter and this, that, and the other thing, and he just does it. It just doesn't faze him. He's a machine now. He just keeps going through with it. Doesn't bother him.
Yeah, well, I always have things I think in my head, and I always like when another driver says them, or I kind of ask a driver without trying to produce my own bias and get the same answer. And Pat Gooden took it upon himself on Facebook to basically say it's basically great that Frederick Aasbo is not driving like a piece of shit driver anymore. That's I'm paraphrasing Pat Gooden.
Yeah, and I would also like to make it very clear that in no way did I say that or did Konig say that about.
Yeah,
that wasn't our thoughts. So
no, and so Pat Gooden also didn't say that either. I just can't exactly remember what he said. Nice. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but there was a lot of people out there, myself included, who just felt like Aasbo, if he would feel contact with spin, if he would. I don't know. He had this very Daigo Saito thing going on where he was always trying to bait a driver into a mistake and kind of focus more on how do I mess this guy up more than I cannot drive you because I'm better than you. And I don't know if it's the changing car or he's just matured in Formula Drift, but it just seems like he's much more committed to being a awesome driver. He was getting smashed left and right and he kept going. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't think anybody questions that he's a top 3 driver, but it's now he's driving like that. He has that confidence. Look, you're going to run into me. You're going to tandem really well, but I don't care. I can still beat you. And I think there was a time period where he lacked that a little bit. And I don't know. He's a champion now. He's close to winning his 2nd championship. He's also the most winning driver in Formula Drift. And so I think some of those factors at play probably have helped him drive with a little bit more confidence than maybe he had before. And I think that's kind of on display at the track.
That's what happens when you are on a Stefan Papadakis program.
But he was on the Papadakis program back.
I know. That. I was just kidding.
he was doing those things. And like, I don't think anybody questions Steph's talents, but
not at all.
It's very clear. If you go back, I think about Wall, go back and watch Wall from 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And I'm going to totally make this up, but I want to say it was like a battle with Frederick and Conrad. Like, Conrad like hit his door. Like, it's very obvious. Like, Conrad came in, hit his door, and honestly, it might have even been Forsberg or somebody. And it literally like just boop, little, like they came out of thing, and it was like this, dunk, just like a little hit in the door. You could see the tire mark on the door, and like Aasbo got hit and literally just shut down, just like steered out of drift and like coasted off the track. And it was like, really, like that's your like, he was just like he was like it's not that he was doing something like wrong per se, but it was like a very like ungentlemanlike way to like take a win. Like, there's a lot of guys who, I don't blame them if they take that path, but I'm also not going to like it, and I'm probably going to talk smack on it. But honestly, if I was a Formula Drift driver, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd probably listen along, and the second somebody hit me, I'd like, let go of the wheel, or I'm very competitive. Like I'm not above taking the easy win, but at the same time, like, you're not going to make many friends in the pits. You're probably going to get called out on the internet. And I don't know. He's like risen above that or changed his mentality. He's clearly like mentally stronger, more confident. I actually haven't even talked to him, and he's one of those people for some reason like I never like see at the events. I also go to less events than I used to, but I don't know. Like I'm going to be in Texas now that I live in Texas, and maybe I'll try and talk to him and see how I feel he presents himself. But I don't know. He has some different swagger about him in the car for sure.
Right. Yeah. So that's it. That's we've run through the points. We have cleared St. Louis. We're moving on to Texas. Some more literal than others.
Yes, exactly.
So, all right. You have anything else you want to add to this episodic closure here?
I mean, I think watch Texas.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a shill for Formula Drift, I think you should watch the event, and I think you should read my article after the fact.
Yeah, you should.
I think St. Louis produced 2 great championship races with 2 battles left. Like we mentioned, Pro 2 is 1 point away. I don't think you can ask for anything better than that.
Right.
And Pro is a 30-point spread, but I mean, Frederick Aasbo gets first and James Dean gets 4th even in Texas, and all of a sudden Aasbo's leading the championship going into Irwindale. Irwindale always seems to be exciting. So
and you know what, and that's a good thing. If you got to the last event and it was already kind of spelled out, and we talked about this I think the last episode, but it wouldn't really feel that much like an exciting an event.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, real quick before we go, like we produced this really, really cool Irwindale tribute piece that has been getting released for a long time. For one reason or the other, it hasn't been released. Now I'm actually just kind of holding it until I know 100% sure Irwindale is like gone. But it's kind of cool, like when some of the memories you think of Irwindale itself, like Jared talks about some really interesting things in the tribute, like how that's the only other time he's cussed, like during the live stream, is at Irwindale. Like it tends to generate these really like emotional and impactful events. And I get some people are jaded by the whole Irwindale's closing every year, but at the end of the day, that's out of Formula Drift's control.
Right, it has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, the investors and the California government are involved, and so you can imagine, for anyone living in the state of California, they can tell you how much fun it is when the government gets involved. Or just ask any car manufacturer that's got to make 50 state CARB legal parts or 49.
Ask any manufacturer,
yeah.
any yeah. Right.
Go to SEMA and ask
anybody there
how much they love the state of California's government, and you can find out about all you need to know about why Irwindale can't get demolitioned in a shopping mall built.
Right.
But I don't know. I honestly, like before St. Louis, I wasn't down on Formula Drift, but I was like, man, this is really turning out to be a dull season. James Dean's bulldozing the competition, and now that Pro 2 had another event, it came to life. I don't know. I'm very rejuvenated. I'm very excited to see Texas come up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, Gateway turned out to be a really good pivotal point to kind of set things up for the last season part of the run.
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
All right. So why don't you tell people where to find you on Instagram?
It's just my name, Joey, Redmond, Redmond. You can find tons of non-drifting content. And I don't even think I've posted in like 3 weeks, but I'm going to work on getting better for you guys.
Right. Texas content. And make sure you head over to Formula Drift's website and look at, read Joey's 10 points. I think they're, we talk about them, you get the in-depth, but go read what he actually has to say. I try not to go too specific and literal into it. It's worth a quick read. So, all right, that's a wrap. For more info on the podcast, head over to konigwheels.com/podcast. If you've been enjoying these podcasts, please subscribe. We're on Google Play, iTunes, and the full video episodes are always on YouTube. You can catch us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Konig Wheels USA. That's it. We're out of here. Peace.